What I found interesting within the text is a part of her study, a part of Hughes' study, was she had found a infant child. He was a boy, if I pronounce it right. His name was Zazino. He was in the community. She brought him up to the actual daycare center that was at the top of the hill in Atto. And she basically let the women take turns caring for this child. Basically, the child's mother had another son and basically had given up on him and was basically leaving him out to dry. She left him under a cot under her bed and basically did not feed him or, make sure he was nourished. So Hughes basically cared for, this child for basically, I want to say, I want to say for about a couple of weeks. And she basically forced the child to eat. Um, the amount of time that the child spent not being able to eat, he basically became accustomed to it, and he did not want to basically feed himself. So she force fed him, and he was starting to fill out, get his form back, and started to get healthy. She returned him back to his mother, and basically his mother had a different outlook and point of view of him and actually started honoring him as her son. Later, when Hughes returned, about close to 20 years later, she met up with that same son of the actual village woman that she took him from, and they basically, how can I say it? They basically reunited, and he still appreciates Hughes for coming to his rescue. And he's formed a relationship with his mother. He actually has stated in the text that his mother is basically his best friend. So I feel that it's kind of great that he's not holding any grudges against her or any vengeance because of how she treated him. Another thing that has come to my attention is that basically the average woman in Alto, well, in Brazil, they experience about 9.5 pregnancies, and I believe I stated that earlier. About three and a half result into child deaths, and 1.5% stirs into stillbirths. Mainly, the majority of the deaths and the stillbirths, they, like I said before, they do occur between 6 to 18 months of the actual lifespan of the child, and about 45% of the children under the age of 5, they do at some point experience some form of basically some form of malnutrition or illness, which does cause death in the later end. Another thing that drew my attention was infant death. In this particular situation, it became routine in their environment in which death was basically anticipated. It was something that they actually looked forward to, which in today's age, it's not something that we're accustomed to unless it's, from an illness or, death related to violence, or in some cases if women do have miscarriages, which is uncontrollable, or stillbirths, or if the baby has an illness at birth and it's uncontrollable or uncurable, which can cause death. Another thing that drew my close attention was that Hughes had asked a priest in the actual community that basically took over a church, and she basically asked him about the baptism ceremony. And mainly, he said that they don't celebrate the death of children. They only celebrate the life of children or the life of people, and they only baptize, you know, people that are, or children that are still living. Um, and again, this is where I read that they tried to tell mothers that Jesus doesn't want all of their dead babies. And mainly, I don't think that he's saying that, Jesus doesn't accept their babies. It's mainly the fact that there's so many children dying to where you can't baptize them all. When you look at the children and you look at the women of this area, most people would consider them, if they're still living, they are also considered survivors. Um, in regards to why I chose to write about this particular experience that Miss Nancy Hughes had, is because I'm not for sure on how up to date, or mainly how caught up, my fellow classmates and professor is with the violence that is going on within Kansas City. But there has been a lot of gang related violence. It has been a lot of infants being murdered.